the masses. However, I am going to diminish this claim today. My proposition is that though in some ways the original Constitution was beneficial to the elite, it was formed solely to benefit the wealthy, but it was a complex process that aimed to repair the Articles of Confederation. My argument is important because it shows that not only economic interests motivated the Constitution. My opponent's secondary claims are one, that the Constitution provides great advantages for the aristocracy, and that two, many basic protections were left out for the masses. There are evidence and reasoning problems within the first claim, and there are reasoning problems within the second claim. In the first secondary claim, that the Constitution benefits the aristocracy, there are evidence challenges, mainly with the sources Charles Beard and Howard Zinn. Charles Beard has said that the farmers were wealthy elites who shared an identity of personal interest, but historian Forrest McDonald disproved this fact when he found that there was more diversity than previously thought. For example, many of them had previously voted for debtor relief programs, and only a few of them had really profited from their security holdings. Forrest McDonald also found that there is not much of a difference in the way a wealthier delegate voted and the way a poor delegate voted. For example, many of the delegates who were among the largest holders of security even opposed the Constitution. This diminishes Howardson's claim that there were large economic interests dominating the process. Obviously, there is much more to it. The reasoning problems I found within the first secondary claim mainly concerned how financial interests dictated the Constitution. First, the statement that the privilege to tax benefited the wealthy is drawn from a very narrow perspective. The Constitution was largely a reaction to the failure of the Articles of Confederation, and a huge reason why it failed was because they didn't have the power to tax. Thus, it was important to adopt the power to tax in order to ensure a financially stable country. According to historian Peter Novick, the framers were more concerned with national economic development rather than their own self-interest. Also, the claim that a strong central government was needed to protect the economic interests is also a conclusion that contradicts her original quote from Howard Zinn, which states that both economic interests and fear of another rebellion drove the need for strong central government. For the secondary claim number 2, there are problems with reasoning, and although the original Constitution didn't include a lot of basic rights for people, it was an improvement over the Articles of Confederation. Also, the lack of rights was corrected through the Bill of Rights before the actual Constitution passed. In response to this claim, it may be true that there are voting restrictions, but Lawrence Kaplan, a world-renowned historian, states that the Anti-Federalists never asked for an extension of suffrage. They also didn't criticize the lack of popular vote for senator and president. Kaplan also points out how the Constitution at least had a popular vote for the lower house, whereas the single-body legislature under the Articles of the Confederation did not even have a popular vote. Also, giving states the power over voting rights may have been adversarial at the time, but it was an important development. According to Murray Dry, a political science professor, the Anti-Federalists had hoped to limit the transfer of power from states to national government, so it can be said that giving the states the right over voting qualifications turned out to be a beneficial thing. Thus, the Constitution was an improvement over the Articles of Confederation. So to conclude, the Constitution wasn't solely driven by the elite's economic interests.
Right. I kind of like the way you previewed the secondary claims that you're responding to with a preview of your responses to those claims also, arguing that there are issues with the evidence and the way the advocate's reasoning, and arguing that contextually things have been largely ignored. I thought that that was an interesting way to approach this. Instead of just sticking with the advocate's claims and then presenting those arguments, you're kind of previewing your responses also. That worked pretty well. I also think that you did a nice job citing counter evidence on each of the points. Sometimes that is in direct response to information that the advocate presented. So, for instance, the issue about the diversity and the aristocracy and the people who are there voting on the Constitution, I thought was a good challenge to the assumptions made by the two historians that the advocate cited. And it sounds, in fact, like that research is directly responsive to that point, like maybe in fact the scholars there did the research in answer to that point. So it's a good thing for you to try and uncover the background there, and it suggests that you did a more in-depth analysis of what the conflict on this particular point is. I also liked the notion that we always need context to give us perspective on what's going on, and you mentioned the failure of the Articles of Confederation as a way to address those issues. And again, you've got a good piece of counter evidence on this point that shows that there were problems there. I do think that there could perhaps be a little bit more discussion of some of the evidence that was used by the advocate, but I did like the way that you came back to the point and tried to give it a different context so that we could see the argument in a way that is less favorable to what the advocate is saying and more favorable to a contrary position. The labeling, when you got to the second point, was also very clear, and you also previewed what was going on there. You basically make some of the same claims on this particular point, and again, you provide some good evidence that responds to the issues that the advocate presented. I also thought it was an interesting strategy to point out that the opponents of the Constitution at the time were not opponents for the reasons that the advocate was talking about, but for completely different reasons. And the notion that this was controversial at the time because of the reasons that the advocate is talking about is a misnomer. It ignores what the real issues were 250 years ago when all of this stuff was coming up in the first place. All right, thank you.